Thank you, Reverend. All right, the House will come to order. Even though the clock says 9 o'clock, it's actually 10 o'clock. Please join Representative Doherty. Is it Representative Doherty or Representative Lindsay who's doing the pledge today? Let's do Representative Lindsay. Representative Lindsay, please lead us in the pledge.
Members, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shi will please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile is excused. Bacon. Rep. Bacon's excused. Baisley. Benavides. Burnett. Byrd. Bockenfeld. Basenecker. Bradfield. Caraveo. Carver. Catlin. Cutter. Doherty. Duran.
Here.
Esgar. Exum. Froelich. Geithner. Geithner is excused. Oh, he's on the wall. Okay. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. Representative Gray is excused. Hanks. Herod. Holtorf. Hooten. Judah. Rep. Judah is excused. Kennedy. Kennedy is excused. Kip. Larson. Lindsay. Lontine. Rep. Lontine's excused. Luck. Lynch. McCluskey. McCormick. McKean. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae.
Present.
Mullica. Neville. Ortiz.
Here.
Pelton. Pico. Ransom. Rich. Ricks.
Present.
Roberts. Sandridge. Sirota. Snyder. Rep. Snyder is excused. Soper.
Here.
Sullivan. Tipper. Titone. Hey. Valdez A. Valdez D. Van Beber. Rep. Van Beber is excused. Van Winkle. Weissman. Will. Williams. Woodrow. Woog. Okay. Young. She's here. Mr. Speaker. Van Beber. Okay. Is that it for now? Oh, Bacon's here. Okay, I think that's it.
With 60 present and 5 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Lindsay.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Journal of Saturday, March 12th, 2022 be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Representative Lindsay. Members, you have heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Okay. All those opposed, no. Ayes clearly have it. The motion is approved. Announcements and introductions. Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow morning, Capitol Commission is going to be in the basement again. Dan File gives a beautiful lesson, and I'd invite you to come down, have some breakfast, and fill your soul while you're there.
Thank you, Representative Pelton. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To all my colleagues in the chamber, I had a colleague ask me what this lapel that I put together means. Mr. Speaker, I had some friends and colleagues put this together. The colors on this little lapel pin, are the Ukrainian colors of the Ukrainian flag. I want everybody to notice this. We are in day 16 of the Russia-Ukraine war. The war continues to rage on with one of the largest refugee crises in the world, in the modern world, that is manifesting itself. They are now bombing schools and hospitals, and they being the Russians, with very little disregard for humanitarian considerations. And if you study the way Russia promulgates war, this is not unusual. This is how they wage war. It's barbaric, it's criminal, and I would ask the Speaker to allow us to have a moment of silence for those that continue to suffer in Ukraine.
Thank you, Representative Holtorf. A moment of silence is granted. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Holtorf, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and glory to Ukraine.
Further announcements and introductions. Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just wanted to announce and congratulate the women from Grandview High School that won a 5A state championship Saturday night. The days are kind of blurring here, but I think it was Saturday night that they won that. I want to congratulate them and their star player Lauren Betts, who's the #1 player in the country on her way to Stanford. Way to go, Wolves!
Way to go, Wolves. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Agriculture, Livestock, and Water Committee will meet today at 1:30 in room 107 to hear one bill.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Appropriations Committee, we are meeting tomorrow, Tuesday at 8:30 in the Old State Library. We'll hear 1003, 1055, 1068, 1247, and Senate Bill 34.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I am fortunate enough to have two announcements to make. I'm going to start off with, I was going to say the more fun one, and maybe it is, but every year the Council of State Governments makes a visit out to the states, and this year we have the pleasure of meeting with representatives from CSG West tonight at 5 o'clock p.m., so from 5 to 7 p.m., CSG West is hosting its Colorado State visit at the Capitol Center Penthouse. And if you are taking notes, that's on 225 East 16th Street. And just go to the top floor. So again, that's CSG West's state visit tonight beginning at 5 o'clock. And then for my other very fun announcement, it is Monday. And for all of the fans of finance, we will be meeting at 1:30 in House Committee Room 112. And we will be hearing three bills: House Bill 1213, House Bill 1241, House Bill 1242. And this is for the hundreds of thousands of fans of finance.
Representative Titone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reminder to everyone, tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m., Joint Technology Committee will be meeting in the Old State Library, and we'll be meeting with the Joint Budget Committee. We're going to be talking about the JTC recommendations for the budget capital IT prioritization. So if you want to know more about that, come and join us.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of House, State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs will be meeting at 1:30 in the Old State Library to hear House Bill 1021, 1125, and 1204.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the chamber, if you depend on coffee and snacks to make it through late nights and sometimes early mornings, please feed the coffee fund jar.
Further announcements and introductions. Minority Leader McKean and Representative Will.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
And Representative Woog.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We all feel that it is an honor to serve with you.
That's very nice. It's an honor to serve with all of you.
Mr. Speaker and House, 3.141592655359. And I used to be able to do it longer, but we were reminded this morning that today is Pi Day. Pi Day is a big deal. Pi Day.
Pi Day. Oh, Pi Day. I would. Thank you.
Fell asleep for
I
a minute.
was thinking.
You were thinking about pie.
Representative Luck, would you please come down? And I want to thank you for your pie for today on Pi Day. Also, could I get the Capitol Choir to join me down here? We have a birthday.
She stopped mid-route.
There's a lot
Come on
going
down.
on right now.
We have a birthday today.
All right. Capitol Choir, come on down.
Runs a little slow.
It seems that she's getting slow now that she's had another birthday, but. Stephanie Lux.
Oh, my goodness. I'm caught in the middle of the Capitol Choir. Hey, come on down. Sing live.
I'm
just trying to turn something in.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Representative Luck. Happy birthday to you. May the dear Lord bless you, shower graces on you. May the dear Lord bless you, Stephanie. May the dear Lord bless you.
Happy birthday, Representative Luck. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you all for singing. My birthday was actually on Saturday. I was kind of hoping to scoot that out and, just be past it, but obviously that didn't happen. It is Pi Day, and we do have pies that are up for anyone in the chamber, to staff, legislators. So they are in caucus room 212 to celebrate Pi Day, and there's a variety of cherry and, I don't know if berry pies, I should say. So happy Pi Day.
Wonderful. Representative Callan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Callan.
Thank you. I was just reminded, since we're all into Pi Day, if you really want to celebrate pie, you need to go out to Dove Creek to Deb's Diner. They have pie hour every day at 10 a.m. And everybody from Dove Creek, around the suburban area of Dove Creek, all make their way into the restaurant, and some of the best town meetings I've ever had were right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Callan. Representative McCluskey, McCormick, McLaughlin, Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The MIC Caucus. Thank you, Minority Leader McKean. The MIC Caucus is here today to remind you about the wonderful Thursday ahead. Yes, folks, it is Dress Like a Sergeant Day, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Remember your green and...
Remember to bring some money. We are going to be funding a couple of charities that will help Ukrainian relief for the people who've had to. They were exiled from their country just like the Irish were, so we think that this is an appropriate place to be donating our funds and our love.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. I have one quick announcement. If you could all help me welcome former Speaker Crisanta Duran is here. welcome to the People's House. So happy to have you back. With that, Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we have a tribute today for Latino Advocacy Day, and I ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Schiebel.
State of Colorado. The House of Representatives convened in the 73rd General Assembly hereby commemorates Latino and Latina Advocacy Day. Latino and Latina Advocacy Day, or LAD, celebrates 16 years of engaging Latinos from across Colorado to advocate for change in the state policy. LAD's legacy enabled Latinos in Colorado to further engage in the democratic process and use their voices to champion forward-thinking policies that make a difference for their families and communities. Latinos are a key part of Colorado's constituency, calling our great state their home. Latinos are leaders who are integral to the fabric of our communities and who continue to build momentum across all segments of society. As educators, artists, healthcare workers, elected officials, small business owners, and farmers, among the many professions that contribute to our vibrant and diverse Colorado communities. Engaging Latinos in the political process ensures that the voices and lived experiences of all Coloradans are reflected in future legislation and in shaping the policies that impact the daily lives of people across the state. May we all recognize the achievements of the Latino and Latina community in politics and honor their contributions to Colorado's long history and democratic governance and the policymaking process. The Colorado House of Representatives pays tribute to the Latino and Latina Advocacy Day participants, past and present, who have traveled to the Colorado State Capitol from communities across Colorado to advocate for a better future. On request of Representatives Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, Alex Valdez, Carrie Tipper, David Ortiz, Monica Duran, Yadira Caraveo, Adrian Benavidez, Donald Valdez, and Mandy Lindsay. Given this 14th day of March 2022, State Capitol Denver, signed Alec Garnett, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please feel free to be seated. I do want to again announce someone that is here in the chamber joining us today, former Speaker of the House, Crisanta Duran, who was the first Latina Speaker of the House. So I just want to give her one more round of applause because that is... Buenos dias and happy Latino Advocacy Day. We'd like to start off by thanking all of the participants that make this day so impactful every single year. This is the 16th year that we have Latinos coming from across the state, coming here to the Capitol today to talk to legislators who represent them on either side, to let them know about the issues that are important to them. Latinos are a growing force demographically, economically, and politically. Our contributions can be traced in every industry, from healthcare and small business to manufacturing, the armed forces, and agriculture. Latinos are not a monolith. And, in fact, our diversity is key to our strength as a community. We are Chicano, Indigenous, Afro-Latino, Mexican-American, Central Americans, Hispanics, and South Americans. We live in communities across Colorado from the San Luis Valley, Weld County, Yuma, and Prowers to the Roaring Fork Valley and the Denver metro area.
Representative A. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an honor to be here today. Being bold, that's what being a Latino lawmaker is all about. And today, we walk on a path that was paved for us by so many amazing people. Speaker Duran, Speaker Valdez, so many people throughout the history of this building, all the way to its founding. I always say, if you want to know about the history of Colorado, start with its name, the color red, Colorado. It's a great place to be. So much heritage in this part of the country, heritage that we advance today in terms of justice and in terms of worker prioritization and all of the great things that we do. So it's just a great day to celebrate all of the gains of Latinos from across history and across the state, and open your doors today to them as they come to visit you, because every single community, every single legislator here serves some of our community, and we'd love for you to make their acquaintance today. So thank you very much.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add that there will be a rally at noon on the West Steps. All are welcome to join. We will have a great lineup of speakers. And then at 12:30, so the afternoon portion, is when hopefully you're around, hopefully we all are still around, that you'll be hearing. And then there was outreach done ahead of time to try to schedule with your offices, to sit down with your constituents that have traveled from across the state to be here today and talk to you all about the issues that are important to them. So thank you so much for being here. You are here, you have to be here. But happy Latino Advocacy Day.
Representative D. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to give a shout out to all those who put this day together, from Chela and to every organization, and welcome Speaker Duran here also once again. So thank you, and please join us.
Majority Leader Escar, Representative A. Valdez, Representative Tone, Representative Herod. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's also another great lobby day today. It's the LGBTQ lobby day, and I will turn it over to the chair of our LGBTQ caucus to give you the details.
Representative Tone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, today, members, One Colorado is going to have constituents from all over the state here to talk to you about LGBT issues. This is something that they do every year, bringing people together to talk about, speaking to us about the issues that are important. And we would appreciate if they come and talk with you, that you give them a little bit of time to have them address some of the issues that are important to the LGBT community. This is a really nice day for people to really feel like they're together on some topics that are important to us as a community, and we appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you all very much. Is there further announcements and introductions? Seeing none, the next order of business is third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of the Senate Bill 54.
Senate Bill 54 by Senators Zenzinger and Kirkmeyer, also Representative Titone, concerning the addition of a recommendation that a district public school be converted to a community school if the district public school fails to make substantial progress under its turnaround plan.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 54 on third reading, final passage.
Representative Larson.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I don't know how many of you recall on second reading I came down and said that I had not yet made up my mind how I would vote on this bill. Because the safety clause was not added on second reading, I feel comfortable that this bill will ultimately do some good, so I would recommend a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 54? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 54 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. For those participating online, Representative Soper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Soper votes yes. Representative Geithner, or Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
No.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes no. Representative Michelson-Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson-Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative Soper voted yes, right, Representative Soper?
Yes.
Representative Soper voted yes. Please close the machine. With 44 aye votes, 20 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 54 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1227.
House Bill 1227 by Representative Mullica, also Senator Smallwood, concerning the continuation of the Healthcare Workforce Data Advisory Group and in connection therewith, implementing the recommendation in the Department of Regulatory Agency Sunset Report to repeal the advisory group.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1227 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1227 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Soper, how do you vote? Representative Soper, how do you
Yes.
vote? Representative Soper votes yes. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes yes. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1227 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1214.
House Bill 1214 by Representatives Young and Pelton, also Senator Kolker, concerning changes to the behavioral health crisis response system.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1214 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1214 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Soper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Soper votes yes. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote? Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
No.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes no. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 54 aye votes, 10 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1214 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Duran, Representative Ricks, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 65.
Senate Bill 65 by Senators Heisey and Story, also Representatives Gray and Will, concerning the status of elected county coroners in Class 2, 3, and 4 counties.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 65 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 65 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Soper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Soper votes yes. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes yes. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote? Say one more time, Representative Duran.
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 56 aye votes, 8 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 65 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 75.
Senate Bill 75 by Senator Simpson, also Representatives Catlin and Byrd, concerning removal by a Board of County Commissioners of a director on the Board of Directors of a cemetery district.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 75 on third reading, final passage.
The The question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 75 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Soper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Soper votes yes. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes yes. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Bockenfeld and Pilton. Please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 75 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Soper, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On request of the sponsor, I move to lay over House Bill 1139 one day until tomorrow, March 15th.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1139 will be laid over one day. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 50.
Senate Bill 50 by Senators Coleman and Heisey, also Representative Soper and Exum, concerning work opportunities for persons imprisoned by the Department of Corrections.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 50 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 50 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Soper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Soper votes yes. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner votes yes. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 54 aye votes, 10 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 50 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Duran, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1279.
House Bill 1279 by Representatives Froelich and Esgar, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning the codification of a person's fundamental right to make reproductive health care decisions free from government interference.
Majority Leader Esgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1279 on third reading, final passage.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we talked about this a great deal, and we only get 10 minutes today, so I want to get to the point. The question we must all ask ourselves is, does elective abortion unjustly take the life of a defenseless human being? Yes or no? To answer that question, we can also ask ourselves an even more simple one, which is the unborn a member of the human family? Once again, yes or no? They are or they are not. If they are, then electively terminating his or her life would appear to be a serious moral injustice. If no, then it's a medical procedure simply akin to pulling a tooth. Answer that question for yourself, but before you vote, please know that based on any way that you look at the question, scientifically, perhaps religiously, or just plain logically, it requires serious mental gymnastics to find even remote justification to show that babies are not human people, and thus, some do not deserve a birthday based on an elective decision. For many, all they need to do is look at a 3D image of their own child in the womb, or feel that child kick or respond to mom or dad's voice, or move to music, and we can tell that's a human being inside. And so, if the unborn are growing humans in the same way that a toddler is a human but yet still growing and maturing, and then we shouldn't kill a baby in the womb in this name of choice any more than we would a toddler. Again, this debate is about one question: what is the unborn? Are they human? Are they members of the human family? We are not the first to debate a question like this: what is a person? What is a human? Or do all people have the equal right to life? To illustrate the point, I'll remind you of the story I told on Saturday in the wee hours of Huck Finn, where Aunt Sally in the book Huck Finn learns of a riverboat explosion. She appears very worried and asks Huck if anyone was hurt. His answer is, shockingly, no, but one inward got killed. In sickening fashion, she immediately appears relieved and says, well, that's good, because sometimes people can get hurt. It was just assumed in a horrific and evil fashion that the black man that was killed was not a human person. I will bring this back to today and our own President Joe Biden on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, who said while defending abortion, quote, healthcare is a universal right for everyone, and my administration is committed to making sure every person benefits from this right. The president, just like Aunt Sally in the book, assumed that the baby in the womb is not a human and thus not deserving of human rights equal to all persons. I recall another president, Abraham Lincoln, who had similar debates about what is a human when debating pro-slavery Democrats. And the act of abortion, of course, very different than slavery. But again, the question is, what is a person? What rights do they have? You see, the proponents of slavery would base their justification on the premise that a black man is different than a white man and thus deserves less rights. And Lincoln's answer was basically a snarky teenager, so what? You see, the question isn't are there differences, the question is do those differences matter? And do they matter enough in Lincoln's time to justify one person enslaving another, or in our time, one person electively ending the life of another? To borrow from Lincoln's closing argument from a debate in 1854, he said, you see, man A is white and man B is black, so it is skin color then that matters, and the lighter having the right to enslave the darker. Take care to reconsider that position, because by this rule, you should be the slave to the first person you meet with fairer skin than your own. So you do not mean skin color exactly, but it is a question of intellect that you argue. That intellectually whites are somehow superior to blacks and therefore have the right to enslave them. Take care again. By this rule, you are to be a slave to the first person you meet with an intellect superior to your own. But then you say, it is a question of interest or perhaps economics, and because of that, you have the right to enslave another. Very well. Then by that rule, you should be a slave to the first person you meet who can make it in their interest or benefit to enslave you. You see, what Lincoln was arguing, what he was arguing is that despite our differences, all people are created equal, and neither black nor white, or baby or adult, should have their humanity stripped for the convenience of another. And so here we are today, leaders of our state and leading proponents of abortion want to disqualify babies in the womb from the human family using reasons that can be used to disqualify all of us at some point in our lives. I'm not taking outlandish statements from the weakest arguments of the 14-hour debate, as some did, but directly from the best arguments, and even those of leading philosophers like Peter Singer, who perhaps is perhaps the leading philosopher of the pro-abort movement today. But scientifically, we know that from the earliest stages of development, the unborn are distinct, they are living, and they are human beings. As we are here today, it is argued that babies in the womb are different than us. My rebuttal is similar to Abraham Lincoln's. So what? The key differences that justify killing them are these: their size, they're tiny, they're small. They're too small to be considered fully human. And that is true. Embryos are smaller than newborns, and newborns are smaller than adults. But why is that relevant? Do we really want to argue that our humanity is somehow based on size, and thus large people are more human and deserve a right to life more than small ones? Men are generally larger than women, but that doesn't mean that men deserve more rights. Of course not. Size does not equal inherent value. I've also heard, well, they're not fully developed, which is also true. Embryos and fetuses are less developed than the adults they'll one day become. But again, why is this relevant? My 4-year-old daughter is more developed than my 2-year-old. And my 4-year-old is less developed than a teenager. So what? Our children do not have more of a right to life than their younger siblings, just based on age? Of course not. You, me, teenagers, babies, preborn babies, have everything that is needed to grow and live within themselves when nutrition and oxygen are available. So people say, some people say that higher mental abilities or self-awareness makes one human. But if that is true, then newborns don't qualify as viable human beings. 6-week-year-old infants lack the immediate capacity to perform human high mental functions, as do those in a reversibly comatose, the extremely sleep-deprived, we can relate, or those with Alzheimer's disease or similar cognitive functions. Here's another. The baby is in the womb but not outside. But members, where you are has no bearing on who you are. Does our value change when you cross the street or travel into outer space? Of course not. So how can a journey 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly change the essential nature of the unborn from non-human to suddenly human? If the unborn are not already human, merely changing their location can't make them suddenly more valuable. Interestingly enough, Peter Senior agrees with this, though we come to very different conclusions as to what that means. I've heard they're completely dependent on their mom to live. Well, that is true for babies of many ages, and at some point it will be true of all of us. If total self-viability is what makes us human, then there are many among us who could be stripped of the right of life. In short, it is far more reasonable to argue that although humans differ immensely with respect to our talents, accomplishments, degrees of development, all humans are nevertheless equal because they share a common human nature and deserve basic right to life. I find it ironic that even in the definition of reproductive health care, that the phrase all stages of life is included. So with this admission that the fetus or baby has life, and yet there is no thought given to denying that person of life because they are in a stage of life. Now, I am running out of time here. I really wanted to tackle a couple of the key arguments for the bill. One was every child should be wanted. I will simply say, since when has anyone's right to life depended on another wanting them? And that doesn't even take into consideration the endless list of folks who want to adopt. And then it was also said that we need this bill because overpopulation is a serious problem. That was said 48 hours ago right here. I will just say Thanos would agree with you, but Thanos was wrong. And so with my last minute here, Mr. Speaker, I will say I am pro-life because it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. And the science of embryology is clear that from the earliest stages of development, you were a distinct living and whole human being. You weren't part of another human being like a tooth in a mouth or fingernails on my hands. You were already a whole living member of the human family, even though you had yet to grow and mature. And you know what else? There is essentially no difference between the embryo you were and the adult you are today that would justify killing you back then. Differences in size, age, level of development, location, or degree of dependency are not good reasons to say we can kill you then, but not now. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the key question is, does elective abortion unjustly take the life of a defenseless human being? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone deserves a birthday.
Thank you, Representative Van Winkle. Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Representative Van Winkle for his great comments. A lot of information there. I am going to take a different path. Sometimes I do best when I just don't write anything down and just kind of talk and discuss what the concerns of my constituents. Because I received a lot of calls, texts, messages, emails since Saturday morning. And what this is clear, obviously this bill allows access to abortion. But what is clear is we're having a discussion over the moral fiber of our state as well as our country. But this isn't anything new. Our country, different states, as well as our state, have had these conversations before, very similar, where we are trying to dehumanize a certain group of people. Because you kind of have to kill them, right? We've had these conversations with slavery, with Japanese concentration camps, and we even have to have somewhat of this conversation with the death penalty. We have to dehumanize somebody and justify, in your mind, to kill them. In many of those examples, we took a turn and went the right path to not dehumanize a certain group and make them worthy of killing them. But a lot of people do know what we're doing. As I stated on was it Friday, Saturday? I can't recall. Pope Francis has gave us guidance and called this murder. Mother Teresa gave us guidance, called this murder. As many other great people gave us guidance through the years when we try to dehumanize a certain group and make it easy to kill them or devalue them. And that's what we're doing, isn't we? I mean, reproductive health. When you say it's health to kill someone, I look back and I don't know the words that were used to justify dehumanizing other classes in our history. But I'm sure a lot of them were used like health to justify it. Equity. So I think we all know, because if we didn't use words to cleanse it and say murdering a child, it'd be too difficult to do, to accept. So we have to use words like that. This shows kind of where a step that our country is taking. And I think in many ways, we're slowly going to be moving to the correct side of this issue with our Supreme Court. But our state needs to follow. And not just dehumanizing, it's just this adds to a culture. And we discussed this associated with different types of violence and murder within our country, of us dehumanizing people and making it easy to kill them. We have a problem, and not to get off the bill, we have a problem with solving solutions with murder. We've discussed that in other bills. With violence. And now we're passing this bill as kids are watching, and we're supposed to tell them, treat people equally. Don't use violence. We teach them not to use violence when they are upset. But here we're saying it's okay to use violence when things are inconvenient. And let's not go off to the red herring. We understand what I think is 93% of abortions are done with for convenience. And yes, there are some that have illegitimate medical issues, and we can debate that. But let's talk about the majority. The majority has to do with convenience. At one end, we're telling our people not to pick up firearms when they have trouble handling things. But on the other end, we're dehumanizing a group and saying it's okay to kill them due to inconvenience. So that's what we're doing. I know, and I understand when people say, well, get more to the bill. This has to do with access, not abortion. What this bill allows access to murder. This opens the door to it. So you can't have it where you say, well, it's not about abortion. Well, it's about abortion. It's about you saying it's okay to come through this door and dehumanize. It's okay to, when it's inconvenient, to, what was it that we read last week? To crush a baby's skull and suck out their brains to get them easier out. I just look at the word equality, and then I think of that late-term baby having to take part of that extreme violence, having their parts broken off, having their skull crushed. And I wonder how that's equality. I wonder how that baby feels. Because we all know oxygen is going through, have the ability to smile, major brain activity, blood flowing through, movement, feeling. And then I try to put my position in that.
You have 2 minutes remaining, Representative Sandridge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Speaker. In that baby and how they're feeling. And if they feel that is health care, do they feel that is equality? So what I'm going to end right here, but while the final thing I would like to say is I hope everyone in this chamber can go home tonight, and God bless if your mother's still around, and say thank you for choosing life. Because if I asked how many people are not grateful that their mother chose life, I wonder how many hands would be raised.
To the bill, Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Speaker. I think I'll end it there. I ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Representative Sandridge. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm somewhat at a loss for words about this particular bill. Obviously, I'm opposed to it. Not much has changed since the historic debate that we had just this past Friday and Saturday, where the minority forced a 24-hour continuous debate on this issue. And if we had any more gas left in the tank, we would have gone longer. Because it's important. There are many elements in this bill that I find morally objectionable. And it's something that we shouldn't even be discussing, but yet here we are. One thing that I will point out is on page 5, starting on line 4, talks about a fertilized egg, embryo, or fetus does not have independent or derivative rights under the laws of this state. That's some of the most extreme language that I've ever seen, especially when it comes to this topic. It's always something that's been discussed, but then to actually codify it into law, to put pen to paper and write that out, seems pretty cold and callous. Then you talk about prohibited actions on page 5, right? No public entity shall deny, restrict, interfere, or discriminate. And then you jump down to here on B, line 13. Deprive, through prosecution, punishment, or other means. We had discussed this during debate about how this bill is overly broad. And we were given assurances that it would not affect other state statutes, but then you look a little further down to the application section. This Part 4 applies to all state and local laws, ordinances, policies, procedures, so on and so forth. We had a debate over parental notification. We even had a vote on that. We were assured that this bill would not affect that. But when the minority tried to offer a solution so as to make sure that that would remain the case, the majority voted it down. Let me also express to you what I see not in the bill. There are no protections in this bill against discriminatory practices, or discriminatory abortions based on the baby's race, gender, or disability. Now, as I said, there are many things that I object to in this bill, but I think absent those protections and those regulations, it kind of really details how extreme and radical that I believe this bill to be. And so, members, I would ask permission that we actually protect children from being aborted because they may be of a different race or ethnicity, that we protect them from someone who would want to abort them because they may be a boy or a girl or because they might have Down syndrome. And so I don't normally do this, members. One, I don't actually, contrary to what others may think, I don't normally come down on third reading, nor do I normally ask for a third reading amendment, but in this instance I will. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask for permission to offer L067.
The question before us is permission to offer a third reading amendment. That's a proper motion. Majority Leader Esker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would ask for a no on permission. This is a substantial amendment, which we know is not allowed on third readings.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I can't argue the fact that it is a substantial amendment. It is. And so, certainly if you want to go by the book, then certainly vote in that manner. But how I view this vote is permission to protect babies based on ethnicity, gender, or disability. So I'd ask for a yes vote because that's what that vote means.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is to offer permission to Representative Williams to run a third reading amendment. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. For those participating online, Representative Soper, how do you vote? Representative Michelson-Janae, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Michelson-Janae votes no. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Duran votes no. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Ricks votes no. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Ortiz votes no. Representative Soper, how do you vote? Representative Soper is excused. Representative Holtorf and Sandridge. We'll just give a couple seconds to, and then And Representative Sandridge will be excused. Please close the machine. With 22 aye votes, 40 no votes, and 3 excused, permission is not granted to offer a third reading amendment. Further discussion on House Bill 1279. Representative Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to offer 3 thoughts to my fellow members to consider before voting on 1279. First, the debate is one between the rights of the mother versus the rights of the unborn child inside her. It's a tough, tough debate. And it's one that we are challenged with to bring wisdom. And no wisdom is being brought to this conversation in this bill. Because rather than consider how the life and the right to life is affected on the one side, that right is simply declared to not exist. We should be having the tough conversation of how do we resolve these clash of rights. And this bill kicks that can completely aside. It's irresponsible of us to not try to figure this out. This kicks wide open the door to late-term abortion, and by allowing no rights to the fetus. What are we doing? Number 2, this bill is supposing that we as a legislative body and the governor, should he decide to sign this bill, if it were to make it that far, have the authority to dismiss the rights of one segment of humanity. Now, picture any other demographic and ask yourself whether we have the authority to decide that they simply have no rights under the state, no rights under the United States Constitution. We do not have such authority. And I pray to God that we never do. Not our role. Speaking of role, perhaps the most egregious piece of this legislation is to place ourselves in the position of the Creator. While we do not have the authority to remove someone's rights, we do not have the implicit authority in this bill to endow people with their right to life beginning at birth. That's not our role, and I fear that we offend God Himself in this bill. Our role, as stated very clearly in our founding document, is to ensure the rights endowed to humans by the Creator. That's where we live. We are not God. We cannot step into His place and make this decision by voting yes on this bill. I beg you to give consideration to the deep meaning of what a yes vote on this bill would be, and please vote no.
Thank you, Representative Sandridge, or Representative Beasley. I was looking at my list. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. You know, Mr. Speaker, this bill is doing something extraordinary, extraordinarily bad in my view, but extraordinary. Let's be absolutely clear. Contrary to the opening statements of the sponsors on this bill does not simply preserve Colorado law on abortion. And for the record, I found Colorado law, being one of the handful of states that allows abortion right up to the time of birth, to be abhorrent, to be barbaric. But this bill goes much further than current law. This bill, in its own way, negates Roe. Why? Because Roe, as a construct, recognized interests of the unborn baby and the woman. This bill states, as a fundamental principle of Colorado law, that the unborn child has no legal or derivative rights. What an extraordinary statement. This bill is the most extreme pro-abortion bill in the country. And substantively, I believe, will make changes in Colorado law in a much more aggressive fashion in a pro-abortion advocacy, not choice, pro-abortion advocacy position. The principle stated in this bill that the unborn baby, right up to the moment of birth, has no legal or derivative rights, puts into question our current criminal codes on unlawful termination of pregnancy. We had an amendment to clarify that because those statutes, the deliberate killing of the fetus, with an exception for abortion, which is currently a Class 2 felony under Title 18, is based upon the unborn child having some legally cognizable, I can't say that word, a legally recognized interest, either direct or derivative. That is a Class 2 felony, my colleagues. And then we have other additional felonies for unlawful termination with a lower mens rea, all based on the unborn child prior to time of birth having some recognized legal interest, as it does under the whole structure of Roe and its progeny. What else does this bill do? You have the most interesting Section 5, or page 5, Sections 404 and 405, which are not just meaningless words. Oh no. Oh no. We are doubling down in a pro-advocacy way, not just to retain, quote, individual choice, which is provided in current Colorado law. It states that for all public entities at every level of government, and public entities definition is very broad and includes public entities way beyond those with elected positions, that from the top down, every public entity is prohibited in every manner, in every way, in every official statement, in every official act, to do nothing that, quote, discriminates, criticizes, attempts to treat in any way different the choice to go forward with a pregnancy versus the choice to abort. And this is not just, in a very interesting way, limited to the time up until the time of birth, but includes a statement, quote, on postnatal care. Well, members, having had my name on a couple of born alive bills, what does that language mean? I'm not sure. What I do know is that this language in 404 and 405 now freezes into place, does not allow the state or any other entity to do anything that would be considered contrary, quote, discriminatory in any method whatsoever on abortion or facilities that provide abortion. Regardless of the medical science, regardless of the data, any such future act appears to be barred by 404 and 405. What about a parade permit that is pro-life, that requires governmental approval? What about a protest permit? What about a tribute or memorial that is pro-life? What about the Colorado Parental Notification Act? Because another provision in 404 and 405 says, there shall be no action by law, by policy, by procedure, or by any other means that is any way against discriminatory or in any way, any other manner, taking a position that restricts in any way, shape, or form an individual's decision on abortion. Well, that's exactly what the Colorado Parental Notification Act does it not? There is no language in here that distinguishes between an adult or an unemancipated minor seeking an abortion. None whatsoever. I would say that Colorado Parental Notification Act is in the crosshairs, members, if this bill is signed, because it is directly inconsistent with the express language of this bill. I note with interest we offered an amendment to clarify that it would not be so negatively impacted. That amendment was rejected.
You have a minute and a half, Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also find the language so overbroad in the prohibited acts by public entities, presumably to include Coloradans that make up those public entities, as to potentially impose a silencing in official acts and statements. You can read the language that broadly. I assume that language is deliberate. We shall see. We shall see, perhaps. I find this bill to be an overreach more than any other bill I've seen. Not just in taking in against, it is not just individual choice, and it is not just access. It is, in my view, a deliberate attempt to wipe every other law off the books that in any way recognizes any interest whatsoever in that unborn baby right up to time of birth, a minute before birth starts, and perhaps if an attempted abortion is happening a minute before birth and the baby is delivered, then what?
Your time's expired, Representative Carver.
This is barbaric. Ask for a no vote.
Representative D. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill allows for women to have choice. Members and I stand for choice. for women's reproductive rights to choose between them and their doctor, and for all Latino women who choose to have that right, and for government to stay out of the way of women's choice. And I want to thank the bill sponsors for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valdez. Representative Rich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Not only do I want to speak to the colleagues here in this room, but to those of you that are listening. I was 21 when Roe versus Wade passed, so I have listened to a lot of debate, pro and con. And I know that's going to date me a little bit because some of you haven't even reached the age of 50. But I want you to know, and especially those of you that are listening, there is an age of accountability. We as Christians know this. And we also know that the unborn or aborted babies are part of that age of accountability. They will all go to heaven. Just because you saw them thrown in the trash doesn't mean they won't go to heaven. Those that made the decision to have an abortion, you will see your babies again. Many of us know that the term reproductive health is code for abortion on demand. Our colleagues in the majority have a friend in this country's largest and most famous abortion clinic. We don't have to say their name. Their name's not worth mentioning, but we all know who they are. And that abortion clinic and all the clinics around this state will most likely continue to benefit from this practice because of this bill. No matter how you dress it up, no matter how clever you are with your words, this is not a reproductive health care bill. I urge a no vote on House Bill 1279.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hanks.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, and good morning, Colorado. The way I looked at this morning is my words don't matter as much as constituents, so I wanted to read a brief comment from a constituent and then close with a few of my own words. And this is from Danielle, last name redacted. Dear House Member, all children in the womb, no matter their gestational age, deserve a right to live and to be born. You yourself were once an innocent child developing in the womb of your mother. How are these children any less important than you or than me? They deserve our utmost respect and care. It is appalling that supporting abortion in any form, most especially abortion up to the time of birth, is even being considered in Colorado. The 8 to 9 week old fetus is a person and can feel pain. According to the Lozier Institute's The Voyage of Life, the fetus starts producing a neurotransmitter specific to pain. Nerve receptors inside a baby's skin can also sense even just a light touch. If something lightly tickles the bottom of a baby's foot, the fetus will bend their knee and withdraw his or her foot, may curl their toes. In addition, the baby shows complex behaviors such as thumb sucking, swallowing, and stretching. Their brain, listen to this is worth a moment's thought. Their brain is developing at a very rapid rate, 250,000 neurons per minute. That is a remarkable statistic. I did not look that up. I'll trust this woman for knowing this and having done the research, but how is that even possible? 250,000 neurons per minute being developed at an 8 and 9 week old fetus. It's nothing short of a miracle as I can see. I mentioned last year because it seems we had a debate similar to this, maybe not as draconian in bill as this, but I've met a few heroes in my lifetime. I think of Pappy Boyington, the United States Marine Corps World War II fighter ace that I got to meet just before I joined the service. I think of Peter Beckman, an author and electrical engineer that was from Czechoslovakia. He taught here in Boulder, and he fought against communism with wit and intellect. He was a hero of mine. But I think when I look back on it, the biggest heroes I have known were my high school classmates, the females, the girls I went to school with that carried a baby to term. Think about how remarkable that is with the social stigma of the time. They were heroic, and I did not recognize it. I did not see it at the time. So my hat's off to them. But the flip side of what they endured is they have children that are now likely their friends. I think I've seen that on the wall of a sister-in-law or brother-in-law about the young child that we raised that grew up to be our friend. I think that's a remarkable thing too. So these high school classmates of mine have friends, those children that are now in their late 30s, early 40s. And I find that remarkable. That's almost, I'm probably older than some of the folks in here, and frankly, contemporary to all of us. So my hat's off to those courageous young women that took that journey and that step. And may I wish happy birthday to their children. I urge a no vote on this bill, and I urge Colorado to monitor this bill. And I will tell you, after our 25 or 26 hours of debate, or whatever the duty day was from Friday into Saturday morning, many of us had the opportunity to go out on the front step, the west side of the Capitol, and meet with constituents that are watching and are paying attention. And this vote matters to a good number of people. I'd urge a no vote, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Hanks. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, esteemed colleagues. I rise before you with an ask. My ask is that you vote on the right side of history, that you vote for life and life abundant. We know this is a complicated issue, and none of us here to judge any of the rest of us. It is not our place to judge. But it is our place to stand up for rights. Whose rights do we stand up for? The rights of adults, the rights of women, the rights of children, the rights of unborn children. But they are rights nonetheless, rights that in this country are protected more than any other country. I have been to other countries where human rights are subordinate to so many things, and they are discarded like garbage. So I stand for the rights of humanity, the rights for all of us. Colorado is at a crossroads today in this chamber. And I ask everybody to stand up for one thing. In the title, Reproductive Health Equity, there is one word that stands out to me. Health. And then there's another word that stands out to me, maybe more important, equity. Equity for whom? What is the equity? Well, the equity that we want is just to get the gift of life, the equity of outcomes for all humanity, most especially for the little ones. You see, we were all little ones before we came to what my grandmother called the cold, cruel world. The cold, cruel world. Unfortunately, if this bill passes, that cold, cruel world will be perpetuated. Now, I want to point out some problems, and I'm not a legal scholar. I have many colleagues on both sides of the aisle that are. There are some serious legal issues with this legislation. For those lawyers that are here, pay close attention. This particular legislation collides with Colorado Revised Statute 25-2-102, 25-2-110, 25-2-110.5, 18-13-101. Has anybody given it that consideration? And I know OLLS, I know their professionalism, but they are not infallible, or we would not be having legal challenges at the Supreme Court for bad legislation that is promulgated right in this House chamber, oftentimes overturned. And that may be the fate of this bad legislation if we continue. Even OLLS will not protect you from the legal challenges that are to come. Now I'm going to give you a trailer with regard to this, because I know I'm short on time. Certificates of death are issued only when there is life, presumably, logically, declaratorily. How is it then, after a failed pregnancy, a certificate of death can be issued if there is not life? Better look in Colorado Revised Statute, ladies and gentlemen, because there it is. How is it that a stillborn is automatically identified at 20 weeks? Minimally identifying the life begins at 20 weeks in the state of Colorado. Is that by just chance or circumstance, or was it randomly selected? I dare say no. Now, I'm not going to get into the definitions of fetal death, stillborn death, but I will say death is indicated by the fact that after such expulsion or contraction, the fetus does not breathe or show any other evidence of life, such as a beating heart, pulsation of blood through the umbilical cord, or definite movement of voluntary muscles. How is it then that we have to have this definition of the unborn if there is not life? You see, we may be on the wrong side of history. And I don't say this to try to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm not trying to impugn anybody. I'm not trying to pass judgment on anybody, because I am no better than anybody in this chamber. In fact, some would consider I'm much worse. But I will tell you, this is legal language right out of statute. If an autopsy is performed, then a death certificate has to be issued in every case, whether the child was unborn or born. If it is not, or if it is. But the mother can request that determination and get a certificate of death for that child in statute. Under 25-110.5, treatment of the remains. And here's a larger problem, because we have heard, and I'm not going to impugn any organization, but we have heard, and it'll be easy for you to figure out, because it has nothing to do with parenthood, that certain organizations actually peddle the remains of fetuses for research and monetary gain.
And Representative Holtorf, I'm going to guide you back to the bill before us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate your leadership. But I will tell you, this is unrefutable and it is factual. And so what happens in that regard in this state as we pass this legislation? Additionally, under 1813-101, abuse of a corpse, and we've had legislation trying to protect and defend those transgressions against the deceased and the peddling of those remains. And I won't say more further about this, Mr. Speaker. I know it's very difficult to speak of. And the statute says the treatment of body or remains of any person in a way that would outrage normal family sensibilities is abuse. How do you define normal family sensibilities? Well, that's an easy definition for me, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's an easy definition for Colorado, those that you are washing.
You have a minute 45 remaining, Representative Holtorf.
Thank you. My colleagues here stand up for justice, equity, and inclusion. For whom? Boy, we say those words in these hallowed chambers over and over and over for every class category and anything we can imagine, but not for the children. So what are these unborn children? Well, Colorado, they are babies, but they are worse than that. They are prisoners in the womb until birth from 1 to 40 weeks. And this legislation says you will be a prisoner at the hand of the state of Colorado in every regard and every way, and your life can be taken. That is what bothers me the most. Who is standing up for the rights of these little people? The little people that just want life. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, every child deserves a birthday. Every child deserves a birthday. Every child deserves their first birthday, Colorado. And that is why the nation, and you will see Colorado rise this year, and there will be a great awakening and a great wave that will turn the scourge that is this legislation, Colorado. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No clapping on third reading. Thank you. Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After the long hours we put in Friday and Saturday, I had an event down in Lamar, Colorado I had to be at. Representative Hanks was there too. I heard from constituents at that meeting loud and clear. This bill was not good for Colorado. This bill was an abomination. How can we even think about bringing a bill like this? And they didn't know the whole of it. When I told them about the parental notification being stripped, that just threw them over the edge. I've gotten emails from doctors, from lawyers, from just plain citizens in my district that are against this bill. We were instructed Friday evening to check our social media, how it was so in favor of this legislation. My social media had no comment in favor. Every comment was against this legislation. I'm against this legislation. I will be a strong no vote. Being a Christian, being a person who believes life begins at conception, I cannot in good conscience vote for this bill. It is truly scary, the number of humans that have been lost to this practice. So I will be a no vote today because I want my name on nothing like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pelton. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm here at the well to speak to you to simply make a request. I don't think Colorado is ready for this. I think this is one of those places that you could change your mind and vote against this bill for a number of different reasons, but different reasons sitting in each of our chairs. One of the reasons that I'm against the bill and that I'm asking for a no vote is on Friday I asked the question about dads and about fathers. And I know that seems counterintuitive about what we're talking about. But I asked the question of whether a young man or any individual that happened to be the father of a baby that was possibly not wanted, whether or not he could ask the mother to carry that baby to full term because he wanted to raise that child. You know, and I didn't think that was out of line. I still don't think that's out of line, but I didn't have anything to base that on. Well, when I went home, a friend of mine told me that he'd been the father of 2 babies that had been brushed away. And he told me this with tears in his eyes. Because you see, today at 57 years old, he doesn't have any children. And you know, I thought about maybe that's the reason that I asked that question on Friday, was because there was somebody in my world that had impacted. And sure enough, when I got home, there was somebody. So I want to ask that question. And if you have that question, then let's vote no and we'll figure this out. We don't need to be the most extreme state in the United States of America in regards to health care equity. We have laws on the books now. I heard a colleague come down here and discuss in a great way about how this overarching was going to change the state of Colorado in ways that none of us had even thought about. That brings me to pause. We need to think this through. Are we really trying to change all of the body of law? My colleague from Colorado Springs, when that lady stands up to speak, I listen. And I listen closely. She brought some things forward today that I hadn't thought about at all. I'm not sure if you have either. But she made sense. It was logic and well thought out. But then again, every time she testifies down here, it is well thought out. The idea that a child of mine could get an abortion without me being told worries me. No way is the state of Colorado a better parent than those of us who are the parents. We need to be involved in those decisions. We need to be there to hold their hand. We need to help guide through some of the travails of life. And this certainly would be one of those travails of life. So today I'm down here as a dad, as a friend, as a colleague, and as a truly concerned Coloradoan. Let's not make this turn on the path that we've been on. This bill won't serve Colorado. It may not do what people are thinking it will do. On demand. There's very few things in this world that are on demand. Colleagues, I ask for a no vote, please.
Thank you, Representative Catlin. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, one of the discussions within the longer discussion that we had the other day was, to use the word from the representative from Castle Rock on the standing of men to even comment on these matters. I thought about that over the course of the weekend and decided, you know what, I'll concede that point. These are weighty matters that we're talking about here, and everybody has the right to their opinion on these matters, especially elected representatives who are here to carry the voice of others, even if I disagree with some of those opinions. Doesn't mean, though, even if I concede the question of standing, that a lot about this debate hasn't bothered me, because it has. It's bothered me that for a lot of years, decades, centuries even, so much of this debate, as I have observed it, has been men in positions of power in society presuming to tell women what to do with their own bodies and their own lives. Has bothered me very gravely, very profoundly, very deeply, as recently as Friday and Saturday, that so much of this debate essentially treats women like objects, as though women's bodies and women's lives are just something else that we debate about in here, like a tax statute or an education statute or some other statute. No. No. Through this lens, you know, I was struggling Friday. When, if, would I come down here? Would I raise my hand and ask to be recognized? How many times would I do that over the course of what turned into a 24-hour debate? I struggled because I didn't just want to be one more man trying to frame a debate about women's bodies and women's lives and women's equality under the law and women's status as moral actors co-equal to men. But ultimately, I did raise my hand a couple times, and I'm here now on third reading, because I will not allow this debate to take place without making it clear here in this chamber and to whoever is watching beyond that, yeah, there are men who stand against these fundamental rights of women, but there are men who stand for them too. There are men who stand for them too. Because it cannot solely be the province of women to defend the equality and the autonomy of women, because this issue is so much bigger than that. So what have I heard when I've talked to women I know about this issue? Certainly never heard from any woman who has talked to me about this difficult subject that she thinks about it like pulling a tooth. I've even had women who are ardently pro-choice, who would defend the right of another woman to make her choice until the end. That if she were to find herself pregnant in an unplanned way, she might even decide to carry to term. Pro-choice women. Does anyone really think that women take these issues lightly? Does anyone really think that women don't feel the gravity of these moments? I believe that every woman does. It's her body, after all, not the state's, not the government's, not ours, not the laws, not society's, hers alone. For the law to say otherwise is to say that women are equal to men only up to a certain point. I reject that premise entirely. Instead, I stand for this premise. Women are and always have been the moral equals of men. They are deserving of no less autonomy under the law than men. They are deserving of the same equality under the law that men have very long taken for granted. For those reasons, I stand strongly in support of House Bill 1279, and I urge a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Weissman. Representative Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, today I rise because I do find this bill extreme and radical. But most importantly, I rise to be a voice for the unborn, to be a voice for the voiceless, because everyone deserves a birthday. See, not only do I have concerns that this bill will entirely gut the parental notification statutes that we have on our books, and I, quite frankly, haven't even heard any comments from supporters of the bill to make that abundantly clear that it was not their intent. We've heard statements that these statutes will remain in place, but then as we've talked in length about, that'll be adjudicated in the courts later. So I'd love to hear a clear-cut statement that it is not the intent of this bill, and that the intent is to leave those statutes in place. But see, although that's a concern for me, again, I rise to be a voice for the unborn, because everyone deserves a birthday. I find this bill too extreme and radical when it mentions that we can't have any government rules, regulations, anything regarding even things like postnatal care. Postnatal care, let's think about that. We're talking about a baby that's born alive, and we can't do anything to make sure that that baby gets the life-saving care that they deserve. People like Gianna Jessen doesn't get the care that she received so that she could come here decades ago and speak before this chamber. Postnatal care, what else does that mean? Does that mean that those precious parts get sold for profit and we can't do anything, can't have any regulations about it? Again, that's a concern, but I'm here mostly to give a voice for the voiceless, a voice for the unborn, because they deserve a birthday. I find this bill too extreme and radical when it could very well gut the statutes that we have in place that give justice for babies that are killed and murdered in a non-elective procedure. We've heard that this bill's about choice, but when the minority party tried to run amendments to make sure that our criminal statutes would give the ability for district attorneys to seek justice for babies that are criminally aborted, those amendments failed. Those were cases where we're talking about it was the woman's choice to have the baby, and now this bill could gut that justice for not only that mom, but that baby as well. I find that very radical and extreme. But again, I'm here to give a voice for the voiceless, because everyone deserves a birthday. I find this bill too extreme and radical when it has the very likely possibility of preventing free speech from not only elected officials but others in the broad applicability section within the law that prevents local governments from enacting ordinances, resolutions, memorials, possibly even permits for people that want to speak on a pro-life basis. That's extreme and radical. But again, I'm here mostly to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for the unborn, because everyone deserves a birthday. I rise today because I truly do think that the pro-life side will be the right side of history, and the history will look back on this bill in a very negative manner. But again, I rise mostly to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for the unborn, because everyone deserves a birthday. I rise in opposition today and find this bill extreme and radical because it allows late-term abortion, something that I do find absolutely barbaric and horrific. We are talking about ripping the parts, crushing the skulls of babies prior to pulling them out of a mother's womb. And that's why I'm here, to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for the unborn, because everyone deserves a birthday. I find this bill too extreme and radical because it will disallow for any sort of informed consent for women when they receive an abortion. I rise to speak for them because I've spoken to many of them who've gone through the grieving process, and the Lord forgives them, for they know not what they do. And quite frankly, I myself am a sinner, and in my Lord's eyes, he sees sin no differently. And so I cannot judge those women and the decisions they've made in the past, for I am sinned as well, but through Christ Jesus, I have found forgiveness. But this bill will not allow for the informed consent process to move forward to at least explain that prior to them making the decision, which makes it radical and extreme. But again, I rise today because today, at this moment in time, I want to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for the unborn, the most vulnerable amongst us, because they deserve a birthday.
Thank you, Representative Neville. Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've heard a lot about this bill. We heard a couple minutes on Friday and Saturday. I think one of the things we've all heard is everyone deserves a birthday. Everyone deserves a birthday. I received a letter from a constituent just this morning that I really, since I'm speaking for her, as well as many, many people in Colorado, as well as many unborn constituents. Dear legislator Kim Ransom, and I'll leave her name out. I ask that you please listen to the voices of the people and potential people in Colorado and vote no on House Bill 22-1279. And then she says, RHEA. It is the duty of our government to protect life as a right guaranteed under the Constitution. Saying a 40-week-old fetus is not a life is like saying that a seedling is not a young plant. A potential life should be protected under the law, just as any other life. Then she went on and spent some time talking about Chris Watts, who was sentenced to 48 years after killing his pregnant wife and also his two children, of course. But one of his crimes was the fact that he killed his pregnant wife, including that baby, that he also was charged with unlawful termination of a pregnancy, meaning that that baby was recognized because it was wanted. Well, if a baby is not wanted, should it be any less protected in law? We need to follow the science. And then she ends with, Coloradans do not want to live in the most radical abortion state in the country. We don't want to be known for this barbaric act. Please vote no on House Bill 1279. Thank you for your time. Sincerely. Again, I will leave out her name. And the thing that I just want to kind of address too are a few things that we've heard in the last hour or so. History has not looked kindly on groups, governments, stronger people that declare weaker ones to have no rights. We've seen it throughout history, and we've seen it in many areas. Sometimes it's wars. Sometimes it's just one country that's stronger than another. Sometimes it's a class of people. Sometimes it's a group of people that's a different color or different race. But when history looks back on one group of people declaring another group of people to have no rights, it's generally not been the right side of history. As a matter of fact, I can't think of any times it was on the right side of history. So I will actually continue the words that I've heard from some of my caucuses that this bill is on the wrong side of history. And I don't know when we'll be able to actually learn that or have it in the history books. But declaring that weaker ones have no rights under Colorado law is not the way we should be legislating. The other piece that I want to kind of answer back is that I was hearing that maybe men shouldn't be talking on this subject because men don't have babies, men can't get pregnant. Well, guess what? Men have children. Men, they may not go through the pregnancy, but they're fathers. There are men that have children that they'll never see because their girlfriend or wife made a decision that they were not able to have any part of. And I find that incredibly sad because in many instances, they've really wanted to be part of the solution, and then we're not allowed to. In addition, we have a lot of men in this in this body that represent a lot of women. And by saying that men shouldn't enter into this decision-making process or be able to speak on this topic, you're saying that they can't represent the women in their district. Just the same way that I started out saying that I'm also representing the unborn in my district. Men have every right to represent everyone in their district, including the women, including the pro-life women, including the pro-life people. And it's completely appropriate that everyone have a voice in this body as we're making this decision. And then when I heard it being said, her body, her choice, well, we're still leaving somebody out there. There's another body in that process. There's a whole nother body. We've discussed this, and I know I mentioned this before, that science and biology has definitely proven that the unborn is human. It's got a heartbeat, it's got measurable brain waves. Before a woman even knows she's pregnant, there is a heart beating. There is no way a woman can exercise a choice without killing a living, growing human being. There's no way to end a pregnancy without killing a living, growing human being. Science really backs up the pro-life side of this conversation. Everyone does deserve a birthday. I think that that's something that I'll keep saying. Everyone deserves a birthday. And I really have not looked forward to the last few days of debating this bill. I recognized what we were up against. I recognized what the bill said, that the unborn and a fetus, remember what I said, it means living one or young one. It's okay to say fetus, but to say that a fetus has no rights is barbaric. It's something that we've been hearing before. I do urge a no vote on this bill. I ask very deeply for a no vote on this bill. May God have mercy on us.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill, and it's been, the last several days has been with a very heavy heart to see this kind of debate come down. We heard a few minutes ago that this was about men oppressing women, and I can't think of the right words to use to describe that, other than a red herring would probably be the nicest way to phrase that. It's a straw man argument that says men are oppressing women because we object to the killing of the unborn. That is simply not what's going on here. Women have stood up. Women have led, in many cases, the pro-life movement, and to suggest that this is about men oppressing women, frankly, oppresses those women. But if it fails to address the issue that is here, which is that there is another life there, the temporary majority would have us believe that those individuals have no rights. They use the same argument against the unborn that they heard a few minutes ago used against those of us in the pro-life movement who say that this is wrong. This is a moral evil, and I ask for your no vote on this legislation. Everyone deserves a birthday.
Representative Molka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of House Bill 1279. As many of you know, I'm a father to 3 small children, and on Friday morning, I was dropping off my 8-year-old to school. And she's in this phase where she's extremely honest, and the filter is gone. And she told me, Dad, you haven't been around enough. The night before, we had a committee for 14 hours. And then Friday, obviously, we all know how long we were here, into Saturday afternoon. And I came home on Saturday, having slept, stayed up the entire time here. And again, my daughter comes up to me and asks me, "Why are you gone so much, Dad? Where have you been?" And I explained to her. I was forced to explain to her what her dad was doing down here, what he was fighting for. And you saw this look on my daughter's face, and there was a level of innocence that left. And the first question out of her mouth was, "But Dad, why aren't they telling boys what they have to do with their bodies?" It's from an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old recognizes that. And we sat here, I've sat here for 14 hours in committee, sat here for over 24 hours on the floor debating this bill. And I listened intently, and I listened to both sides, and tried to understand. Tried. But what kept coming in my mind was that when I'm sitting in committee, and I hear testimony brought here by the opposition, testimony brought here by members in this chamber, calling for the execution of a woman for having an abortion, calling for the fact that a woman should be forced to carry a baby, even in the case of rape and incest. And I bring that up on the floor. I bring that up on the floor on seconds. And in 24 hours of debate, no one condemned that. I want to be clear. The people of Colorado are listening. Our mothers are listening. Our daughters are listening. Our grandmothers are listening. The women in this room, our colleagues, are listening. And we hear that. They hear that rhetoric. They see the rhetoric not only here, but in other states where laws are being ran to try to tell a woman that she can't have an abortion even when her life's on the line. Having a bill ran saying that she should be executed if she has an abortion. That's what the women of Colorado are seeing. That's what the women of Colorado are hearing. And so I want to be clear up here, and I want to say on the record, and I want the women of Colorado to hear this loud and clear, that that is disgusting, it's wrong, and that's why we fight so hard, to make sure that never happens in our state. That's why we fight so hard, because their lives are on the line. And that's what we're doing with House Bill 1279, is to make sure those rights aren't infringed upon. And that's why I get up here in such strong support. I want to thank the sponsors for the work that you have done to make sure that we are enshrining these rights in our state, so that the women of Colorado, so that my daughter doesn't ever have to worry about that. I ask for a yes vote, members.
I want to thank the members for the long debate on second reading and the respectful debate here on third reading. Let's be thoughtful of not impugning anyone's motives in terms of what they were saying or what they did say. We've gotten pretty close to that line, and I just wanted to remind everyone that we shouldn't cross it. And we've done a very good job of being as respectful as we can in this chamber. So let's maintain that as we continue with debate. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're hearing a lot today about what children deserve, and I want to start my comments by saying that every child deserves more than just a birthday. They deserve to be born to a family that wants them. They deserve to be born to a society that is prepared to step up for them and support them when family cannot or will not. Members, caring about a child is not limited to making sure that they are born. They are a lifelong commitment. I rise in strong support of House Bill 1279 because our daughters deserve the same freedom and rights that all women have had since the passage of Roe v. Wade. Women are equals in our society. The right to decide when and whether to have a child is not a tool of convenience. It is a fundamental liberty that must be guaranteed to women. Please vote yes.
Representative Pico, and you have...
Mr. Speaker, I won't
plenty
take
of time remaining.
plenty
Representative.
of time. I won't take more than a few seconds. I just want to respond to that scurrilous charge about that we were calling for the execution of women who have an abortion. I'm aware of no one in the pro-life movement who has ever advocated for that. I am aware of no legislation anywhere introduced that calls for the execution of women who have had an abortion. That just isn't true. And Mr. Speaker, I do want to thank you for trying to raise that cautionary note. Let's keep it back where it is. We are talking about preserving the life of someone. How many women have never had a birthday because they were killed in the womb? How many men have never had a birthday? No one is calling for execution of people who do that.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Pico. I believe Representative Molka might have been referring to something that happened in committee, but I do think that there was a brush into the chamber, and that's why we wanted to take a pause to make sure that we were holding that line. So thank you for that reminder as well. Representative A. Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I grew up taking choice for granted. I used to, like most kids, say things like, it's a free country, mostly when I was doing something that I shouldn't have been. But I never really expected to see these rights under attack or to be rolled back. I just assumed that living in a country that has a national identity of freedom and liberty, that we meant it. You see, choice is always hard. Freedom is always hard. I remember as a kid wondering why they allowed the Ku Klux Klan to march in front of this Capitol every year. That was really uncomfortable. I didn't like that. I didn't like that expression of freedom, but I understood. It was absolute and fundamental. That's what choice is. I understand why this issue is divisive. But as a man, I've always told people this is none of my business. I firmly believe that. And I think I will never know what it's like to make this decision, and I will really never know what it's like to feel the attack coming on my personal rights, because I know if somebody told me that I couldn't do something, I would do it anyway. I believe I am not alone in that. Choice, liberty, freedom, identities that we like to talk about, but this is what it's all about. Even when you disagree, you stand up and you fight for it. Now, I am a firm believer in a woman's right to choose. No one's ever telling me what to do with my body. Never. It's not going to happen. And I stand in solidarity behind the women of this country, of this state, to have that same authority over themselves, over their vessel. It is theirs. It is not the state's. At the end of the day, freedom means believing in the liberty of others to make their own choices. And if that doesn't extend to one's person, what's next? So I ask you, if there was to be a rollback, what would come next? What choice would you lose next? It's a slippery slope. It's one that we shouldn't even be standing near. This is America. This is a free country. And that freedom most certainly extends to the bodies of women. So I'm a strong supporter of this bill. I encourage everyone in this chamber to vote yes because they believe in individuality and liberty and freedom. And if you can't do that, you have to ask yourself, what's next? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative A. Valdez. Representative Williams, you have 6.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm still somewhat at a loss for words on this particular bill. And I've been listening to the debate intently myself, and I hear things about, women having, the ability to make the choice, right? And the question that keeps coming up to me is, what about those unborn women? There seems to be a glossing over of that. We also hear about how children have a right to be born to a loving family. That I certainly would agree with, but they also have a right to be born even if they don't have a loving family. We used to have a member in this chamber. I think all of you remember who I'm talking about, Jim Wilson. He was adopted. His birth mother carried him to term, and then someone chose him. It certainly wasn't the most ideal situation, but he himself got that right to live. I also hear about how this is how America works. We've heard many in the majority come up and talk about freedom, protecting the right to choose. Well, there's one fundamental thing that I think is missing in this debate. And that notion that I think is missing is that you don't get the right to do wrong. We talk about rights. What does that mean? What does it mean to have our rights? Well, it certainly means that you can't do wrong to someone else. The issue of abortion, as I've stated, during debate on second reading, and as I will continue to state, in my mind, is akin to homicide. It's akin to murder because there is a third person within the equation. There is an objective truth. There is a moral standard by which we ought to live. I firmly believe that in this life, and certainly the next, that I will have to give an account to my Maker, the Creator of the universe, the one who gave us these unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the question is, what is our role as government actors? Our role is simple. It's defined in the Declaration. It's defined in the Constitution that we are to protect life, liberty, and property and to uphold due process of law. In what instance does this bill fulfill that mandate? It doesn't, members. Representative Carver said it best. This bill is barbaric. I don't know any other word to describe it. It is an acknowledgement by this government that it is okay to take innocent life, that it is okay to create an exception within our own homicide statutes, because that's what it is. By allowing someone to pursue abortion on demand, we are allowing them to create a death sentence for someone in the womb. Why? Because they happen to be in the womb. In any other instance, when a child would be murdered outside of the womb, that's when our statutes would kick in. But in this instance, because of their location, that somehow changes. Members, this is the most consequential vote I think any of us will take. Out of all the bills that we've heard, out of all the debates that we've been involved in, this is the vote that will echo through time. What you do here matters. What you vote for matters. I, in good conscience, could never vote for a bill like this because it violates the most fundamental principles that this country was built on. And I do that not only because I understand what was written in the Declaration, I not only do that because I understand what's in the Constitution, but I do that because fundamentally I believe that there is a higher power. I believe in God. This was talked about by Representative Neville. He stole the words right out of my mouth. My faith informs me of what is right and what is wrong. I'm not perfect, none of us are, but on this issue it is black and white. The taking of innocent life is wrong. Period, end of discussion. This bill is certainly extreme, not only because it allows for unmitigated, unrestricted abortion, but it's extreme in the first sense anyway. Even if it had restrictions in place in the bill, even if it had regulations in place written in the bill, it would still be extreme because we are talking about life and death. We are talking about the taking of innocent life. No matter how you slice it, we are talking about murder. And it is our responsibility as representatives of the people to defend life, liberty, and property. Anything short of that is a dereliction of duty. So I ask for a no vote.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Will.
I come up in strong opposition to this bill. You know, we're talking about everyone deserves a birthday, and I spoke about it early on in this process on the House floor, but I really do question whether this is a health issue, you know, but talking about health equity, reproductive health equity with the bill. I think it's a societal issue. It has nothing to do with health. It's a society issue. And it's where the desires of one overrides those of another, and one that has no rights. That's the baby in the womb. You know, and I hear about the right to make private medical decisions. When those medical decisions concern another individual's right to life, I see that as a huge problem. I continue to see that as a huge problem. Also, when I spoke earlier, we talked about, you know, a couple years ago, I think 2 years ago, we were talking about the death penalty. I struggle between, when we're supporting, we supported death penalty, the other side of the house didn't, and this makes no sense to me. I can't figure it out. We're talking babies or criminals, and not condoning capital punishment for some of our most violent criminals, but yet these innocent young children, we can do this to. That I truly continue to struggle with this, and this bill probably bothers me the most because I think it enshrines into law that you know, the fertilized egg, embryo, or fetus does not have independent derivative rights under the laws of Colorado. That is really a problem. And then you know, no matter what you do and talk about this bill, you cannot sugarcoat abortion. I'm a strong supporter of women's rights. I think earlier I talked about the culture in which I grew up in. Women were on a pedestal. Women were the givers of life. And from the time I was a little kid, that was beat into our heads. You know, our moms and grandmothers were the matriarchs of the families, and that's how you treated them, because we all understood women were givers of life, and they ran the show. I remember both of my grandmas, both sides of my family, they called the shots. So I continue to struggle with this, and I said earlier that this is death by desire, and I continue to struggle with that as well. You know, I had all kinds of emails from constituents in my district, and I can tell you, over in the rural part of Colorado that I represent, I can tell you how all those emails were sent to me. Vote no on this bill. I'll admit, being transparent, I did get one email in favor. And that actually came out of rural Colorado there. But I also have concerns. I think this bill is going to make a lot of people seek Colorado for abortions. We're going to be the destination state. And I think there'll be some young women that could possibly be traveling to Colorado to get an abortion without their parents' knowledge. I see that as a huge issue. Also worry about the towns and cities that I represent, because they won't be unable to keep these abortion clinics out of our communities. Again, enshrining this into law is a huge problem. Several people have talked about liberty up here, and I preach liberty every day. I'm all about liberty, but I think everyone knows that liberty has sideboards, and there's morals attached to liberty. We all believe in liberty, but there's morals and values and sideboards attached to liberty. So I'm in strong opposition to this bill. Please vote no.
Thank you, Representative Will. Representative Biesnicker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Biesnicker.
I wanted to reiterate a few comments that I made on second reading, as I think it's helpful not only for our debate together, but also in recognition of what I believe to be a variety and really a diversity of thought and belief around this issue. As I shared on second reading, I used to be ordained clergy in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I did that for a number of years, working on behalf of folks in my community. I was always proud in that tradition to really welcome folks with a true sense of hospitality. And in the case of my religious communities in relation to this bill, we did all of that work and all of that dialogue literally around a kitchen table. I founded a series of house churches that were designed to provide welcome and thought and debate and discussion around what were seemingly contentious issues among our community. The issue of reproductive rights, and more acutely abortion, has come up numerous times in my work as clergy, and of course since my time in this body. And I think it's helpful to just remind ourselves, as I often reminded myself in my capacity as clergy, wearing that collar and aware of the responsibility and often the optics around what that collar means for folks who have been damaged and hurt by organized religion, by people like me. I often reminded myself that my job was to respect a plurality of belief and tradition and convictions around difficult issues. And so I offer these remarks today because I think there is more than one side to the story. And if we say Christianity, a more accurate term is Christianities. Because there are a variety of beliefs and faith traditions who confess truths to the bill that is before us now, including the thousands and thousands of years of commentary and dialogue which inform the Christian faith. The more you learn in theological education, and I would say even public policy, the less you know. But what it does help you do is to ask good questions about policy, to find out what you hold to be true and what I hold to be true, and how we can engage those two things in dialogue with one another in a way that is respectful and does not perpetuate, as I often had to remind myself, a culture of shame around issues which are difficult for people to discuss in the first place. I think that has immense bearing on our discussion around this bill and the work that I'm committed to as a member of this body. Yes, of course, my faith traditions inform the way I vote. Everybody has an ethical and moral framework with which they use to evaluate policies, whatever words you put to it. But when we do that, I think a path forward in discussion around these issues is to never assume that one person or one faith tradition holds a whole grasp on the truth. We see a part of the issue, and we speak to that if we're doing our jobs well. I see a part of this issue. It's rooted in my faith tradition. It's rooted in my family experiences around the issues of reproductive health and abortion. And I testify to that, and I'm happy to do that day in and day out, and for as long as it takes. Because as was mentioned in this chamber on Friday and Saturday, we can stay here as long as it takes to do what is right by residents in our state of Colorado and in my district, for whom this is important, and in my faith tradition, for whom this is important, and in the faith traditions which inform mine, for whom this is important. I would urge you to consider this in your remarks before this body. I offer that with respect for beliefs that are different than mine and are no less valid than mine, but certainly do not have a truth that outweighs mine. I respectfully ask for your yes vote on this piece of legislation, not just on behalf of religious communities for whom this is important, but for the thousands and thousands of folks who will count on these vital services in our state for the years to come. It is truly my honor to vote yes on this bill when I'm given the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Basenicker. Representative Van Beber.
As men, when you come before this body and you speak about the fact that this topic is none of your business and you have no right to discuss it, what I hear you say is that you are abdicating your responsibility and your rights to speak to this issue. And nothing could be further from the truth, for it takes two to create this new life. And to state that we are just debating about women as objects, then there is just I'm so sorry. Then there is just disingenuity in that you refuse to acknowledge that the females that you kill in utero are objects as well. There is no consistency in this logic. But what I will speak to the reality of is this. If I look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary and I look up the term Holocaust or genocide, it has a very short and clear definition. It is the mass slaughter of people. And that is why I will speak for the unborn. It is why I believe everyone should have a birthday, and why I will vote no on House Bill 1279. I urge you to do the same.
Representative Montine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to start, I have a testimony to read, but before I do, I just wanted to preface it by saying that every person, every pregnancy is unique in every variety or combination that you can imagine. So the reasons why someone would need abortion care are as broad and various as all of those situations are. And so I would like to bring a perspective of one patient who submitted written testimony to us so that you could understand this one unique situation. And I will redact her last name. My name is Melissa. I am a resident of Denver, Colorado, and I had an abortion because I wanted a child. Today, I'm the proud mom of a superhero-obsessed toddler because 5 years ago, I had access to an abortion. Baby fever struck me in my mid-30s. A baby was something I went 35 years not knowing I wanted, and suddenly, it was something I could not unwant. Being a mother consumed me. Around the date of our 10-year anniversary, my partner and I were thrilled to be celebrating another milestone. We were pregnant and 20 weeks along. I was low risk, and our baby had a strong heartbeat. I confidently strolled into my 20-week ultrasound appointment, soon to be grandparents in tow, expecting nothing but joy, happiness, and cute pictures you see in movies and read about in magazines. Moments into my appointment, it was obvious something wasn't right. I did some jumping jacks, drank some orange juice, but my baby was mostly still, and the images were fuzzy. I was referred to maternal fetal medicine and was assured that lots of women are sent there to get better pictures of their babies. A few agonizing days later, we arrived at the high-risk clinic. I remember the room was dark and full of screens, like an uncomfortable, small movie theater. After a long and silent scan, the doctor calmly shared that our baby had not developed kidneys or a bladder and would not fully develop her lungs because there was no cushion of amniotic fluid around her. Our baby had a rare diagnosis called Potter syndrome. A lightning strike, he said. It was an incredible shock and too much to make sense of in that moment. I grew up in a household dedicated to reproductive health care. I support abortion access in all ways possible, from how I vote to where I shop. But it never crossed my mind that I would one day be in such a position of immeasurable grief and gratitude for the choices before me when making a decision about a baby I wanted. I was 21 weeks along when we decided to move forward with an abortion. The morning of my first appointment, the clinic called to cancel because I was one day past the 21-week mark, and they could no longer assist me. After so many days of managing a body that looked and felt pregnant, and a mind that was attempting to know better, this news came as a wave of helplessness. But being in Colorado, my helplessness was met with access to a clinic that could support my family. I received the kind of care that every woman and every family deserves. That kind of care every person should receive. Through this experience, I was so fortunate to have met Dr. Rebecca Cohen, and I mention her name as she's a frequent testifier in our committee. And she had also submitted testimony about her care for this very specific patient. Dr. Cohen was kind, compassionate, and supportive of my experience and my decision. She gave my family a safe space to embrace our decision without shame, without judgment, and without questioning. She gave us a space to grieve, and I know that is where I found the strength to grow from this tragedy. I share my story with you today because everyone that hears me also teaches me something new about my experience and further confirms my commitment to advancing access to reproductive care. This is why I am such a strong advocate for abortion rights. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my story as a reminder for me and others that at its absolute core, abortion is health care.
Thank you, Representative Wantine. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will be brief, but of course I do rise in support of this bill. On Saturday night, I talked about my mom and how she had to take care of women, military women, who went off of base overseas and had an abortion that nearly killed them. So some of you all know that my mom is now in a nursing home, and I go down to the Springs to see her on Sundays. And she said, "Well, Les, how'd the debate go? Can you turn it on? I really want to know what's going on with women's reproductive issues." And I was a little disappointed because we had to have a conversation about rights that we have fought for generations continuing to be under attack. But we discussed it. And my mom told me, well, Les, you know, I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-women's health care. I'm pro-choice. I support life, and I support the families that raise these kids. Because you see, even if we criminalize abortion today, we abolish it, or we say it doesn't exist in the eyes of Colorado law, or we make people who have abortion felons, or their providers, or their Uber drivers criminals. That will not stop abortions from happening. What it will do is push people, women, families, into the shadows to have unsafe care. Back alley abortions. They still exist in this world, and they will exist in Colorado if we don't protect a woman's right to choose today. We were elected to do a thing. For my constituents, one of those things was to fight for justice and to fight for women's rights. So I stand firmly with my constituents, men, women, people, gender non-binary, who stand up and say that we want healthcare to include reproductive freedoms. But I also want to say to the people in Colorado and elsewhere who are listening, Democrats, Republicans, independents, those women and families who have chosen to have abortions, I am not ashamed of you. I support you in your decision. We talked about government-sanctioned shaming on Saturday night. I do not believe in it. I believe that people should have the right to do what they need to do with their bodies. And I thank the bill sponsors for so courageously bringing this bill forward and affirming that. I believe in access to contraception. I've used it when I needed to. Yep. I believe in the morning after pill. I've had to use that too. I'm not ashamed. In fact, I'm empowered. If we want to decrease the number of abortions in Colorado, there are a few ways to do it. I remember having a conversation with then Governor Hickenlooper about this. Provide comprehensive sex ed. I support that. Provide access to contraception for all people. I'm grateful that I could afford it. I support that. Provide access to support for families once they have children. I support that. Don't stigmatize people for making decisions. And by the way, it's not just the young college student who makes a decision who this is affecting. Families also make decisions to keep their families at the size that they are today. And I am not ashamed of you. I'm not ashamed of your decision, and I support you. So, I'm sure my time is ending soon. So I just want to say thank you to this body for the hours of debate that we went through. I want to thank folks who are willing to stand up on the side of choice and health for the people of the state of Colorado. I want to thank the men, the women, the gender non-binary folks who are so courageous to stand up and tell their own abortion stories, but also to support the right to choose for all Coloradans. I'm a strong yes on this bill, and I hope you will be too.
Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I prayed over this body Friday morning, and it was a prayer really truly to ask whatever power, whatever God you believe in, to lay his, her, their spirit over this body. And so in that spirit, I will thank all of you for having a robust debate. Those I agree with, those I don't. But my heart is heavy. And my heart is heavy because this issue, I feel like, keeps going back to more of a rhetorical level than a level of true debate about what exactly this bill, this law would do. I can't say anything better than what you heard from Representative Carver. She's one of the smartest people in this room. She's one of the smartest people in my life. But I can tell you my distress. Thank you to the individuals who will look up and pay attention. Shame on those who won't. The challenge that we have in this debate, and we always say this, are you going to change anybody's mind on third reading? Even if I'm not going to change your mind, even if others standing here will not change your mind.
Minority Leader, let's keep it to the bill and not to the members. Don't direct any of your comments to the members in the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your guidance. I would implore you to listen. This bill truly has a very, very important element that we have tried to tease out in the things we've discussed. That when we talk about these issues, number one, every single person in this room brings a valid point of view. We live in a representative republic, and therefore, if we're going to talk about health care, if we're going to talk about abortion, 80,000 of my citizens cannot come line up over here. I am the representative of those people who voted for me to come as their voice. So to hear in any way that because of someone's gender they don't have a voice here, that's troubling, because this bill should be a discussion of what's best for the state, not just each one of us. And my heart is heavy because, as I shared, these decisions are not unilateral, they're not bilateral. These decisions should, in their very best, but truly in their very need, be 2 or 3 people. And one of those people is a child whose voice has to be expressed by those who love them. I was asked a couple of weeks ago about this bill, upcoming, and kind of what my concerns were. And it hearkened me back to a ballot issue that we saw run. And it was whether or not people should be able to get life-ending drugs because of a terminal condition. And if you recall, part of my conversation about that bill reflected in this conversation as well was what is the guidance, what's going into that? What are the pieces of that decision? And then is it absolutely pristine? Because if you're going to consider that, then it has to be. If you're going to consider indemnifying the taking of a life, then the conditions therefore have to be pristine. And I bring us back here. As you heard from Rep. Carver, they're not. Belief one thing, fact something else. And my grave concern is what it says about us when we veer away from the idea of what a culture of life looks like. When we veer away from what does it look like to give those among us who have the least ability to change their circumstances a life in the womb, and often an older person in our communities. What is it that our society says about how we protect those people? And in this instance, I think a voice is forgotten. And that gives me pause, and it should give all of us pause, that all the voices are not in this room, in this bill, in this consideration. And if we are going to talk about what the end result of some reproductive decisions might be, those voices must be there. I urge a no vote on this bill. I urge a no vote for a lot of reasons, but I think most of all, I urge a no vote because no matter how you parse your way down this particular discussion, that voice must be heard. Vote no on this bill.
Assistant Minority Leader Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As members, of course, I'm up here to voice my opposition to 1279. And before I kind of get into some of the points that we heard on debate as to why, there was a couple things I wanted to respond to in terms of what I've heard up here during the course of this debate, whether it was the 24 hours the other night or whether it's even been this morning. And the first thing is that having men stand up here and speak, and I think the minority leader touched on this as well. You know, I represent approximately 80, 90,000 people, just like most of us or all of us do in our districts, and amongst those voices are certainly mothers, women, men, fathers, children, you name it. But I won't apologize for not telling those women specifically that reached out to me to ask me to speak on their behalf. I won't apologize for telling them no, that I shouldn't. Well, because I'm a man. Second, we heard about truth and how there's your truth, my truth, this truth, that truth. The truth of this bill is that it eliminates one side of the conversation. That is the truth. Third, we also heard that there is a thought in that all children should be welcomed into loving homes, and certainly I wish that that were true. But I stand here and I tell you that the way I was raised, I would argue, was far from a loving home. But here I am, nonetheless, and I believe I've had a pretty good impact. Maybe not perfect, but certainly a pretty good impact. So some of the reasons that we debated as to why 1279 is far from good. First, we discussed the idea of free speech, and we heard even another piece of that today that had to do with a permit, maybe, to have a parade. In fact, there was a demonstration, a rally, if you will, that was just held on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. And I firmly believe that the way that this bill is written right now, those demonstrations would be prohibited. A resolution offered by another body of government across this state might be deemed inappropriate. A proclamation, a tribute, a parade, there are direct implications for our freedom of speech as this bill is written. Transparency, this is my second point here. Transparency regarding health equity. If the state deems that this is so necessary, then certainly we should be in the business of also understanding what is its direct impact. And I ran an amendment specifically on this. And I argued that the state knows how many children are born each day. They know the gender. The state knows what counties those births come out of. The state knows the time of day. We can collect it on that side, but on the other side, on the abortion side, somehow that might somehow have a chilling effect. Third, the prosecution. And this is probably one of the ones that troubled me the most. I think we ran 2 amendments. L054 specifically had to do with the entire section of statute, which is Article 3.5 of Title 18. And for those listening in, that section of title is actually called Offenses Against Pregnant Women. But the way that 1279 is written, I would argue, it removes or at least places into question the ability for prosecutorial discretion if any section of 3.5 Title 18 is violated. And I read some of those. There's unlawful termination of pregnancy in the first degree. There's unlawful termination of pregnancy in the second degree. There's unlawful termination of pregnancy in the third degree. Unlawful termination of pregnancy in the fourth degree. There's vehicular unlawful termination of pregnancy. There's aggravated vehicular unlawful termination of pregnancy. And the statutes go on. And the way that this is written, I certainly feel that it does call into question this specific section of statute. And I went so far as to read some stats, and I'll share some of those again. These are directly from the the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and this is their Domestic Violence and Pregnancy Fact Sheet. Homicide is the leading cause of death amongst pregnant women in the United States. 50 to 75% of women abused before pregnancy are abused during pregnancy. And it is estimated that up to 20% of pregnant women experience violence during their pregnancy, making it more common than gestational diabetes or preeclampsia. So I think that there is a necessary piece when it comes to 3.5 in Title 18. And certainly it also says that there is something special about what is happening inside of the pregnant woman that we would actually even have these statutes here. But as I've said already, I think 1279 certainly can call into question as to whether or not they will have any relevance should 1279 pass. Fourth, we talked about parents and parental notification, which is also currently outlined in statute 1322-704, and how there is concern that it could certainly be disruptive to that very specific section of statute. The role that a parent can play when it comes to abortion, whether it's teaching about abortion, whether it is helping a child navigate whether or not that's the right thing for them, there is a very specific role that a parent can fill, and oftentimes they are the best person to fill that role. And 1279, in my opinion, certainly disrupts the parental notification. You know, we've all, well, I don't know about all of us, but certainly I have. I've seen the sonograms that, my wife went through with both of our children. And I was stationed in Germany for her entire pregnancy of our second son. And in Germany, when I was stationed over there, it was a little different than it was here in the States. But every time she went in, which was once a month, we got to have the sonogram. And I wasn't always able to be there because I was in the field or wherever I was, and she would make sure that she got pictures to share with me to show the development of my son, Caleb. And you can see the development from month to month, from sonogram to sonogram. And I spoke about, I think Friday, Saturday, I'm not sure which day it was, about response, that the baby has its own response. It could be in response to food that the mother eats. It could be in response to a position that the mother was laying or sitting, that there is sometimes kicks and pushes, there's hiccups. We've heard about babies sucking thumbs and scratching and doing the things that a normal person would do. And we've also heard the description of what it is, what oftentimes or what does happen during an abortion, some of the more graphic descriptions. But I'd also like to to point out that we know that during those abortions, the baby kicks.
You have 1
The
minute.
baby pushes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The baby tries to escape the very thing that is happening to them because they can feel that pain. I will be a no on 1279 for that voice that can't cry out, because that's what those efforts are. It is an attempt to cry out. And before I leave, I think, my colleagues have offered many good arguments, stories, and others. There are two that specifically stand out, and I'd like to thank the representatives from HD 43 and 20 for your comments. Very specifically. I am opposed to 1279 on my Christian beliefs, on my experiences as a father, and on my firm belief that life certainly does begin at conception.
Representative Luck. Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Women, unborn, the right to liberty, the right to life. My body, their body. As voices raise, shouting the same refrain, ears tend to deafen until there's silence. This body could remain silent on this question, and women would still have access to abortion in this state. Even if the Supreme Court strikes down Roe and turns the question back to the states, nothing here will change. Nothing here will change until this body actively decides to change it, one way or the other. We've heard from the bill sponsors that the elections have proven Colorado's desire for these rights. If that's true, there's no reason to be fearful. There's no reason to push this bill through. The law will remain as it is. If we, however, as a state, do want to decide to make this a fundamental right, then we should go through the process of at least giving it the constitutional authority. It shouldn't be just statutory. If this right is as essential as is stated in this bill, then let's make sure it can't be changed by the next legislature. Let's give it the weight that it's due. I find this bill to be quite peculiar. Stealing from history by claiming it's a fundamental right, trying to add the credibility that comes with that exceedingly weighty term, and yet only putting it in statute. I find it also peculiar because no fundamental right that I know of has ever been deemed absolute. Even the right to life, we don't deem to be absolute. We say that there are just takings of life. For instance, self-defense, and up until a few years ago in Colorado, capital punishment. So if this is a life, if all can agree with that,
then as a state, the question becomes, is it a just taking of life? Is there any due process required for that life? Under this bill, it says no. But also under this bill, because of that absolutist framework, there's no protections for women either. The fear of back alley abortions, as my colleague from House District 45 pointed to, the realities in some abortion clinics across this country could very well be reality here. In fact, when I put forth an amendment to ensure that the state could continue to regulate doctors and health and safety standards for abortion clinics, the bill sponsor responded by saying, these are the very regulations we're seeking to restrict, because they restrict access. Think about that. A 14-year-old girl finds out she's pregnant, scared out of her mind. Under this bill, I read it, she doesn't have to inform her parent. And if that isn't the case, then an amendment should have been adopted so as to clarify. She goes to this facility and she thinks to herself, well, this is legal, so it must be okay. It must be safe. Little does she know that it's not. We can talk about the stats, and we try to put those forward to you, about how at certain weeks, the harm, the potential for harm, increases by 38%, basically every week with an abortion, vis-a-vis the harm that could be for labor. Many of my colleagues on the right did not speak to those rare exceptions of health of the mother, of rape and of incest. The bulk of their comments rested in that category, which is really 95% or better of all abortions, done for socioeconomic reasons. If there was a stork, if that was a true story, and at the moment of conception, you get a knock on the door, and there lying is a baby, and you look down at it and you say, oh, that's a girl. Didn't want a girl. I guess I'll smother it. Oh, that one's disabled. Let's slit its throat. This is how my colleagues on the right see this. This should not be. When we talk about choice, again in that 95% category, many of my colleagues on the right would say a choice was made to engage in an activity. This bill is about the consequence of that choice and trying to get out of it. These are hard truths, but they are truths. And I am not casting shame, I am not casting blame, I am simply saying, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? 60% of women say they did not want to have an abortion, but they felt pressured by the people in their lives, by their circumstances. 60% did not actually feel like they chose. Many of them didn't know what they were getting into, and they believed the things that were being told to them about a clump of cells. This won't have any impact. You'll get right back to normal, and that's not what they found. And years or decades later, they find themselves still experiencing the pain of that decision. And because it's okay, because it's the woman's right to choose, they feel further isolated, like something must be wrong with me to feel this way. And I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but it is experience. And it has led to a lot of brokenness in our families and in our communities. And there are a lot of people, men and women, who are walking wounded.
You have a minute remaining, Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I am not one to support a savior state mentality. It's true, I vote no on a lot of bills. But I and many of my colleagues who also vote no on a lot of bills spend a lot of time and a lot of resources coming alongside families outside of this building. We care about life. Please, I implore you, this bill is not necessary. People will still be able to get their abortions. But let us be more thoughtful. Let us put up proper guardrails. Let us make sure if this is going to be a fundamental right, it's done in the right way. But to ram this through without understanding all of these different dynamics is just going to lead to more brokenness. And for those women who are watching and those men who are watching in the gallery, on television, wherever, let me leave you with this final thought. If you are in that category of people who feel isolated and alone, who are grieving and struggling with this decision or your decision, please know that there is healing. Please know there is a way forward. Please know. Thank you.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll just say there are a few comments that were made about the fact that women who are pregnant suffer domestic violence at an incredibly high rate, and that's true. And I can say that not just as someone who knows that because I read it on a piece of paper, it's because I prosecuted domestic violence against pregnant women a great number of times. And it was hard, and it was painful, and you have to hold someone, and yet sometimes they did lose their children as acts of domestic violence. But the idea that the solution to that is taking away the rights of the women belies a complete misunderstanding of how criminal justice should work. If we're going to address violence against pregnant women, we shouldn't penalize the women. We shouldn't take the rights away from the women. We should take the rights away from the men or women or whomever it is who are attacking the women. But nothing about this bill somehow underlies or undermines, I should say, victims of domestic violence who happen to be pregnant. We should address that. We have addressed that, frankly. We've passed bills since I've been here to address that. But the idea that somehow this bill undermines protection of women who are victims of domestic violence is exactly wrong. This bill protects the rights of women who are victims of domestic violence. And again, the rest of the underlying things I'll let everybody talk about. We've been talking about this for a while now, but this bill, if it does anything with respect to victims of domestic violence, it protects their rights. Thank you.
Representative Froelich. Majority Leader Esker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and colleagues. I just want to say thank you for the hours and hours of conversation we have had on this topic. To the women and the people who have gone through what this bill is addressing, I'm sorry that you have been called barbaric, evil, extreme, radical. You've been told you're going to hell. You've been called a murderer. This week I've been called those things, simply for standing up to make sure that women in this state reserve that right that they have, that fundamental right to choose what is best for you and your body. There's been a lot of misinformation put out there this morning. Information that we talked about for 24 hours. Just want to clarify. The statute that includes the parental notification still exists. This bill will not impact the parental notification statutes that already exist in law. Criminal statutes have been talked about in this well. Those statutes for actual crimes, which abortion is not, will stand. First Amendment rights have been discussed in this well. First Amendment rights will stand even with passage of this bill. The question came up about what is postnatal care. Postnatal care is care given to the mother and her baby after birth. This bill talks about reproductive rights, which includes prenatal care, postnatal care, family planning and contraception care, fertility care, which many of you in this body have actually voted against. And yes, abortion is a part of reproductive health care. That's why it's all listed in the bill. When we talk about calling this health care, that's absolutely what this is. It's been mentioned we should just wait to see what happens in June. We should go to the ballot in November, implementing something maybe possibly in January. What's the rush? What's the urgency? Knowing full well that rights may be falling later this summer, we're not the only ones standing up and pushing the urgency. 531 anti-abortion restrictions in 40 states this year alone have been introduced. In Texas, a 6-week ban rewarding people a $10,000 bounty for turning someone in. Now, there's even conversation in Texas of asking for the death penalty for a woman who may have to have an abortion. In Florida, 15 weeks. In Idaho, $20,000 bounty now is being discussed for folks who turn in someone who had an abortion. A bounty. In Oklahoma, 30 days after a woman's last monthly period is when they're saying you can have an abortion until. If you've ever been pregnant or hoped to be pregnant, 30 days after a woman's last period, but that's just science. Missouri. There's conversations right now about introducing a bill that would outlaw abortion during an ectopic pregnancy. Do you know what happens if you don't have the abortion procedure in an ectopic pregnancy? You could die. That's why we call this health care. We are protecting a woman's right to choose what is best for her between her and her medical provider when it comes to her health care. That's what this bill is doing. What we have in Colorado right now protects women. Why we're running this bill right now is because we are afraid of what could happen if we do not put this in statute today. If Roe falls, 22 states will ban abortion outright. 15 states will have rights codified in statute or in the Constitution. The remaining states, like Colorado, that have not done so, will have no rights. What that means for us in the state, why this is being proposed as a state law, is because counties and municipalities in the state can decide for themselves what their law is going to be. How is that safe? How does that make sense for the state of Colorado? Members, there's been a lot said about this bill. I just wanted to come down and clarify what is in the bill and what isn't in the bill, what this law will do and what this law won't do, and why we absolutely need it now, and why we will be here as long as it takes until we get this done. I would appreciate your support for this bill, not for me, but for the people of Colorado who deserve the right to make their own choices with their loved ones and their medical professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Representative Froelich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honored to serve with you too, Representative Froelich.
The Reproductive Health Equity Act ensures that Coloradans can make private medical decisions about reproductive health care, including whether to have an abortion. I understand that people's views on this are impassioned. And let me make it clear, if I haven't already, I feel passionately that Coloradans should be trusted to make decisions about the full range of reproductive health care. And I want a Colorado and an America where women are not subjugated to the religious beliefs of politicians. I have been in the movement for reproductive rights for 4 decades or so. When I first got involved in Colorado, we had a pro-choice majority at the legislature, but we did not have a Democratic majority. We had several pro-choice Republicans who also supported LGBTQ issues, and we were able to pass emergency contraception, long-acting reversible contraception, as well as marriage equality. Those Republicans are still here in Colorado, although they no longer are represented at the Capitol. I urge folks across the political spectrum to support this fundamental right, to support our right to privacy, and to affirm our bodily autonomy. Private medical decisions. We have seen attacks on the privacy component of this bill. People who oppose this bill would like to collect additional data, conduct surveillance on everything from the relationship status of the person seeking medical care to their economic status to their method of birth control. Medical. We heard opposition to the fact that reproductive health care is health care. It is. Decisions. And here we come to the crux of the issue. The opposition to this bill does not want women making this decision or even having the opportunity to make this decision, specifically because they are opposed to one of the decisions that might be made. And indeed, that one decision, to have an abortion, was what we discussed for the majority of the 24-hour debate in this chamber and the 14 hours in committee. The overwhelming testimony in committee and remarks in the chamber in opposition to this medical procedure are based on deeply held religious beliefs. I respect people's relationship with their faith, and I haven't said it in my previous remarks that I am a woman of faith. Because while our faith is intertwined with our values and our values inform our political views, I do not believe in imposing my religious views on others. No one religious group holds a monopoly on righteousness, and I believe my colleague from Larimer County said that eloquently. Imagine for a moment that instead of saying Christ Jesus or God, as 100 witnesses did in testimony, instead, 100 witnesses invoked Allah or Buddha or Brahmin or Mary Baker Eddy. And we had clergy from the religious community speak in support of this bill. We have several faith-based organizations in support of this bill. We had Christian clergy in support of this bill. And we have members who are people of faith in support of this bill. How much does the opposition to this bill oppose an individual's right to make this one decision? Enough to denigrate women as being too selfish, too ignorant, too sinful, too murderous, too career-obsessed, too easily manipulated, too irresponsible, too sexual. We heard that if you engage in an activity known to cause pregnancy, you should be prepared to face all consequences. The opponents of this bill want to press the lever on whatever power they have to curtail our ability to make this private medical choice. Opponents in testimony talked about standing outside of clinics. I have seen this, as many of us have, the folks who stand outside of a clinic and berate and shout at everyone who enters, whether they are there for a cancer screening, prenatal care, or an abortion. I have seen the opponents who like to residentially picket the home of a provider in a neighborhood, in my neighborhood. Opponents who've been known to take to the airwaves, mention the doctor's name, where he lives, or she lives, fire up the feelings about them, because we know our providers have to wear Kevlar vests and hire additional security. And our healthcare facility that was maligned again just moments ago suffered an attack resulting in the death of several people who worked there. Perhaps that's too much. Perhaps the opposition would just like to make it very difficult for you to access this medical procedure. Well, 87% of Colorado counties do not have a provider. The testimony from committee that was read to us over our 24-hour debate, condemning to hell the women who had abortions and all of us who work to make that decision available, to label us all evil or idiotic or both. And of course, we did hear testimony from people who believe that women who have abortions should receive the death penalty. What I heard Friday night was impassioned, measured, personal, and persuasive remarks from members in support of this bill. I'm deeply grateful to my colleagues who shared what was private and often painful with us. Over and over again, we heard how important it is, how important it was, and how important it shall be that these decisions be made by the pregnant person and their medical provider. If they so choose to include their rabbi, their pastor, or their family, that is up to them. I ask the people who are opposed to this legislation to join with me in making a world where reproductive health care decisions are not economically motivated, where we dismantle systemic racism, a world where women receive equal wages, where children do not go hungry, where housing is a right, mental health is prioritized, contraceptives are readily available, domestic violence is not tolerated, and LGBTQ folks are respected. Trust Coloradans, trust women, preserve our privacy, preserve our choices, and pass the Reproductive Health Equity Act.
Your Representative Froelich. Representative Hanks, you have 4 minutes and 40 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can do that. I want to read something from a constituent just came in. And will it move anybody in the last 5 minutes of a sermon? Probably not. But what it will do, in my estimation, is give everybody an idea of the breadth of conviction on this. And these are thoughts I don't think we've heard yet, and they ought to be heard. Childbirth and motherhood are the utmost natural and God-given rights of womanhood. It is the honor and distinction of being a woman. These selfish notions enshrined by this bill were initially conjured during the Women's Revolution, which has trained many of us to neglect this distinction, and by design. House Bill 22-1279 not only causes a degradation of womanhood, but is an attack on the family through the deception of empowerment. It inches the notion that sex is cheap and that there is no risk to it. Ultimately, it incites that life is cheap. House Bill 22-1279 calls infanticide birth control and a woman's right. This is a mutilation of humanity. Such disregard for life will surely break and condemn our society into darkness. Parenthood and parental rights are the most basic part of our humanity. This right is under attack by House Bill 22-1279. It serves to indoctrinate our children with the Democrat and Marxist ideology that their parents have no authority over them or over their health care. This is, again, by design, in order to usher in Marxism. The sanctity of women, family, and ultimately life are under attack and threat by this bill. The sacred natural rights of women and family are not only cheapened, but undone and broken society is easy to overtake. That's from constituent Marie. I want people to be aware of where people's concerns lie with this bill. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to add much more. Members, I would just simply ask for a yes vote on this bill, as it's usually customary that the bill sponsor gets to have the last word.
See no further discussion. The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1279 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. For those participating online, Representative Soper, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Soper votes no. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Michelson Janae votes yes. Representative Duran, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Duran votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Please close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 24 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1279 is adopted. Co-sponsors. You're already co-sponsor, Representative Michelson Janae. Please close the machine. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, March 15th.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over one day until Tuesday, March 15th. That brings us to announcements and introductions. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, and all who are waiting the Finance Committee hearing. We will start in 15 minutes, so that will put us at 1:45.
Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Agriculture, Livestock, and Water Committee will also meet at 1:45 in room 107. Thanks.
See no further announcements and introductions. Majority Leader Escar.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.